My son sold his condo and burned through $600,000 on cars, vacations, and luxuries for his wife. Then they showed up at my door with a moving truck, demanding to live in my house. When I refused, my daughter-in-law slapped me in front of the entire neighborhood. That was the moment I pulled out the signed loan agreement. And when they realized I was taking them to court, the panic on their faces told me one thing: justice was finally on my side. Before we dive in, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The phone rang as I lifted my fork. Meatloaf, Lorraine's recipe, steamed in the old blue dish, sweet with ketchup and onion. I grabbed the landline on reflex, the red line rattling faintly past Lincoln Park like coins in a can. "Dad," Aaron said, bright and breathless. "Amazing news. We closed. 700,000. Can you believe it?" My fork touched the plate and stayed there. "You sold the condo." Yeah? Cash buyer, no inspection. Danielle nailed the staging. We're celebrating. I sat because my legs decided it for me. Lorraine looks out from the mantel in red scarf and wind, a small smile that used to brace me. "Where are you two going to live?" Traffic hissed on his end. I heard Danielle laugh. "Don't stress. Short-term place, maybe a little trip. The important thing is we've got breathing room." "Breathing room," I repeated. "Aaron, the 300 I gave you." Silence. A turn signal clicked. "Dad, that was years ago." 2 years and 9 months, I said. "It was a loan. We never signed anything. You said it was family help. You told me not to worry." "I told you I'd help," I said. "And you promised to pay me back when you could. I took that money out of my retirement." He made that teenager sound, half laugh, half shrug. "You're fine. You've got the house, the pension. You always say you don't use money for anything." "I use it to sleep," I said. "And to keep my word. I expected you to do the same." The party noise around him dulled. "Look, Danielle needs a reliable car, and we need furniture that isn't junk. We're finally in a place to invest in ourselves." He said invest like a blessing. My appetite left. "A call would have been decent," I said. "So would asking about the terms before spending the down payment on a victory lap." He blew out air. "We'll talk later. We're meeting friends. Try to be happy for us, okay?" The line went dead. I stood with the hand set to my ear for a few stupid seconds, as if it might apologize. The kitchen smelled like brown sugar and baked tomatoes. I rinsed the plate clean, dried it twice, then wandered into the living room because that's what lost people do. Lorraine watched me from the frame. If there's such a thing as advice from the dead, it's a still photograph that refuses to look away. "Am I overreacting?" I asked her. The radiator ticked, the red line sighed. No help from either. I rewound the years. Aaron calling the day he and Danielle found the place. "Dad, it's perfect, we just need a bridge." Danielle's gratitude with polished edges. I handed them a future and told myself it stitched the family tighter after Lorraine tore out of it. That story felt noble enough to hide the risk. I'm not naive about money. I know how quickly generosity becomes policy, how fast policy becomes entitlement. I also know the sound a promise makes when someone folds it in half and pretends it still fits. I went to my desk in the good corner and opened the drawer. A key, a stack of yellow pads, a smooth stone from that beach, a lacquered pen I bought the week after the funeral because owning one felt like a plan. I dated a page and wrote what Aaron had said. I wrote what I heard inside it. Later, be happy, you're fine. I put down my reply in ink because paper doesn't blink. It was a loan. I didn't think the word contract yet. Not because it wasn't true, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't just angry. Mercy without boundaries is permission. I've learned that truth the slow way. I reheated the meatloaf and ate standing at the counter like a man who lives alone, which, of course, I do. Salt does what it does to grief, it pulls it to the surface. After, I walked to the corner and back past the iron fences and stoops I've known for 30 years. The air had that thin Chicago edge between summer and whatever's next. A saxophone practiced somewhere. In windows, people debated, laughed, scraped plates. The city kept moving, unbothered by my private arithmetic. By the time I returned, the heat in my chest had cooled into something workable. I made a short list: sleep. In the morning, pull the file box from the closet. See what exists where memory insists it should. Call nobody tonight. Threaten nobody. Write everything. Decide when the anger is not steam but steel. I poured iced tea, set the glass on a coaster Lorraine bought at a street fair, and let the apartment go dim a room at a time. The floorboards gave their old, familiar answers. In the hallway mirror a man looked back who could choose not to be fooled again. Before bed I stood in front of the photo. We taught him kindness, I said. Maybe I forgot to teach him boundaries. Her smile did not change, the mercy and cruelty of pictures. I touched the frame anyway, like it could close a circuit. In the bedroom, the fan lifted the curtains. I lay down and felt the city settle, sirens far off, a motorcycle impatient, the L whispering past. The future didn't feel like something bearing down on me for once. It felt like something I might build. In the morning, I told myself, I would open the closet and pull a box onto the kitchen table. I would take out what is true and lay it flat in the light. I slept as if I'd tightened a loose bolt somewhere inside the walls. Not victory. Not even relief. Just a small, honest click that said, "This will hold until morning." The pounding came like gunfire. I jolted awake, heart galloping, the clock glowing 7:12 a.m. For a moment, I thought it was a dream. Then it came again, hard, urgent, rattling the door. The red line hadn't even started its full roar yet. Lincoln Park was still groggy, streets slick with dew, joggers not quite warmed up. I pulled on my robe, stumbled to the window, and pushed the curtain aside. A moving truck squatted in my driveway. Behind it, Aaron's Honda with its trunk gaping open, 2 suitcases balanced like trophies. The knocking resumed. "Dad! Open up!" I swallowed the sour taste of sleep. My first thought was, maybe they'd been robbed, maybe this was a misunderstanding. Then Danielle's voice cut through, too sharp, too chipper. "Frank, come on, it's freezing out here." I tightened the robe's belt, shuffled downstairs, and looked through the frosted glass. Aaron grinned at me as if he'd won something. Danielle stood behind him, hair perfect, coat expensive, the kind of morning polish you don't put on for emergencies. I unlocked the deadbolt but left the chain. "What is this?" Aaron's grin widened. "We're here." "Here for what?" "Dad, since we sold the condo, we need a place while we figure out next steps. You've got all this space. It's temporary." He gestured at the truck as though it were proof of logic. "No," I said. The word surprised me with its firmness. "Absolutely not." Danielle's smile slipped. "Frank, be reasonable. You're rattling around in this big house by yourself. We're family. Family helps each other." The chain still held the door. I shook my head. "You made your choices. My house isn't one of them." Aaron's face shifted, cheerful to cold. "Don't be selfish. You have rooms sitting empty." Behind him, neighbors were already pausing. Old Mr. Donnelly pretended to check his morning Tribune. Mrs. Alvarez's curtains twitched. A young couple walking their dogs slowed down. My block, quiet as a library most mornings, was suddenly an audience. I closed the door 2 inches, the chain still across. "Go find an apartment. A hotel. You've got $700,000. Danielle stepped forward so fast the suitcase toppled. "That money's allocated." "Allocated?" I repeated. "Danielle has needs," Aaron said, voice stiff. "Needs more important than a roof?" "You don't understand," Danielle snapped. "You've had your life. We're just starting ours. And you're blocking us out like some miser." My hand tightened on the doorframe. "I want you to leave my property." Aaron's eyes hardened. "You'll regret this. When you're old and sick, remember this moment." It was then Danielle leaned in close enough for me to smell her perfume, something sharp, citrus and ice, and slapped me across the face. The sound cracked the morning open. My head snapped back, my cheek burned. I stumbled against the door. Gasps echoed. Donnelly dropped his paper. Mrs. Alvarez opened her curtain fully. The dog walker froze, leash taut. Aaron grabbed Danielle's arm. Enough. But his voice wasn't apology, it was annoyance. He yanked her back toward the car. You'll regret your greed, Danielle shouted. You'll regret being such a bitter old man. They tossed the suitcases in the trunk. The moving truck driver, who'd been pretending not to notice, started his engine. Tires squealed against asphalt as they pulled away. I stood in the doorway, robe clutched, cheek blazing, heart hammering. Donnelly crossed the street, paper under his arm. His face was pale but steady. Frank, I saw it all. Mrs. Alvarez appeared on her porch, arms folded tight. So did I. That woman raised her hand to you, and in front of everyone. The Johnsons, out for their walk, stopped at the mailbox. We heard the whole thing, Mr. Johnson said. She had no right. I touched my cheek. It throbbed but didn't bleed. Humiliation burned hotter than the sting. 35 years raising Aaron, and it ended with his wife striking me on my own stoop. Frank, Donnelly said, lowering his voice, that wasn't just a family spat. That was assault. The word landed heavy but true. Assault. I nodded slowly. Thank you? Neighbors lingered, whispering, some offering nods of support, others just watching. I wanted the ground to swallow me. But underneath the shame, something else stirred, a steel thread winding through my chest. I closed the door and leaned against it, cheek pressed to cool wood. The silence inside was different now, not emptiness but resolve. They had crossed a line. I walked to the study, opened the drawer, and pulled out the manila folder I'd only glanced at the night before. My hands no longer shook. I laid the papers on the desk. Aaron's signature sat there, a neat scrawl on page 8. The promissory note, the terms, the default clause. Danielle's perfume still lingered in the air, sharp and unwelcome. But the paper smelled of ink and certainty. The slap had been the last indulgence. Mercy was over. I straightened the folder, smoothed the edges, and whispered to Lorraine's photo on the mantel. They just gave me every reason I needed. Tomorrow, I thought, I would make a call. And this time, it would not be to Aaron. I woke before dawn, cheeks still sore. It wasn't the sting that roused me but the echo, the sound of Danielle's hand meeting my face in front of my neighbor's. My mind replayed it in loops, the gasp, the thud of her palm, the look on Aaron's face that wasn't shock but irritation. He was embarrassed she had gone too far, not that she had struck me. I brewed coffee in the old machine Lorraine had sworn she'd replace, the kind that rattled louder than the L. Its sputter filled the silence of my kitchen. I poured the first bitter cup and sat at the table with the manila folder I'd pulled from the desk drawer. It had been 3 years since I placed these papers inside. 3 years since I asked my old college friend, an attorney named Nora Feldman, to draft something formal. Aaron had balked at the idea back then, said contracts were cold, between family. I insisted. Lorraine was already gone, and I couldn't afford to gamble with my retirement. The irony? That signature, scrawled reluctantly in Nora's office, was the only thread holding my son accountable now. I spread everything across the kitchen table like blueprints. Engineers trust paper, not memory. Paper doesn't forget. Loan agreement, principal $300,000. 5-year term. Payments beginning January 2022. Default clause, missed 3 months, entire balance immediately due. Annual interest, 8%. Aaron hadn't made a single payment. Not one. By my calculations, with interest, the total stood at $372,000. I pulled a calculator from the drawer, the same one I used in my working days to check load-bearing calculations on steel beams. The numbers blinked steady, impartial. $300,000 principal. $72,000 interest. $372,000 total. My hand was steady as I wrote it in block letters on a yellow pad. Total owed $372,000. The humiliation from yesterday hardened into something sharper. Anger is messy, but numbers are clean. I thought back to that Sunday in 2021. Aaron and Danielle had sat at this very table, Danielle's hand on his arm, both of them looking at me with practiced sincerity. "We've found our dream place, Dad, but we're 300 short," Aaron had said. Danielle had added, "We've never asked you for anything like this. We didn't know where else to turn." I'd made coffee just like today. Same sound, same bitter smell. I remember telling them, of course. "This is for your family." Aaron's shoulders dropped in visible relief. Danielle had dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "You're the most generous father-in-law in the world," she had said. I stared now at the copy of the thank you card they had given me afterward. "Dad, you're the best. We'll definitely pay you back. Love, Aaron and Danielle." The handwriting, Aaron's familiar loops and rushed strokes, mocked me. Promises written in ink but discarded like trash. A knock startled me. I opened the door to find Harold Donnelly standing there with his Tribune tucked under his arm. His face was serious. "Frank, I wanted to check in. You doing all right?" I touched my cheek unconsciously. "I've been better. Half the block saw what you did," he said. "That wasn't a spat. That was assault." The word struck again, heavy but clarifying. Assault. Harold's eyes were firm. "If you want witnesses, you've got them. Me, Alvarez, the Johnsons, even Tomming." His doorbell cam probably caught it. I nodded slowly. My instinct was to shrink, to avoid the shame of the neighborhood knowing my private failures. But instead, I felt something close to gratitude. Neighbors weren't just gawkers, they were allies. "Thank you, Harold," I said. Back inside, I returned to the documents. My late wife's photograph rested on the mantel above the table, smile caught forever in silver frame. I whispered to it like a prayer. "You always said I was too soft on him. Maybe you were right." By mid-morning, I had labeled 2 folders, original loan and legal action. In the first, I placed the signed contract, withdrawal slips from my retirement, the thank you card, photos of Aaron and Danielle's condo purchased with my money. In the second, I placed my fresh calculations, a copy of the loan, and a page titled Witnesses with names of every neighbor who'd seen or heard. The bruise on my cheek had darkened to purple, almost artistic in its symmetry. I snapped photos on my phone, angling the light just right. Evidence. Proof. Then I did something I hadn't done since Lorraine died. I called Nora. She answered on the second ring, her voice brisk but warm. "Frank? It's been a while. I need help," I said simply. "What happened?" "My son sold his condo for $600,000. Told me the $200,000 I gave him was a gift. Yesterday morning he and his wife tried to move in. When I refused, she slapped me in front of the neighbors." Silence stretched for a heartbeat, then her voice sharpened. "Do you still have the contract?" "I do. Signed, dated, witnessed." "Then you're in good shape. That's breach of contract. And assault on top of it. 2 solid cases." I exhaled slowly. "What do I do first?" "Make copies of everything. Document the bruise. Write down every word exchanged. Then bring me the folder. Frank, this isn't just about money, it's about boundaries. You've been generous." They mistook that for weakness. Her words felt like steel braces on a shaky beam. "Thank you," I said. "Don't thank me yet," she replied. "Thank me when we win." After hanging up, I poured a second cup of coffee and studied the folder. The contract no longer felt like just paper. It was a weapon. A blueprint for reclaiming my dignity. The slap had humiliated me. But the signature, Aaron's reluctant scrawl on the last page, gave me the last word. Paper doesn't forget. And neither would I. By Monday morning, the bruise on my cheek had settled into a deep violet, A badge I hadn't asked for, but one I intended to put to use. I showered, dressed in my old navy blazer, wrinkled but presentable, and packed the folders into a leather briefcase Lorraine had given me the year I made partner at the firm. I hadn't carried it in years. My hand felt steadier gripping its handle than it had holding anything in a long time. Downtown Chicago was waking up as I drove in. Traffic bunched near the river bridges, horns pressed by men in suits and women in sneakers, rushing to towers of glass. I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. The bruise had softened at the edges but still shouted its story. I left it uncovered. Paper wasn't my only evidence. Nora's office sat in a converted brownstone on Dearborn, bookended by coffee shops and a florist that spilled buckets of tulips onto the sidewalk. The brass plate by the door read, Feldman and Price, attorneys at law. I stepped inside to the scent of old wood and newer coffee. Nora appeared from her office before the receptionist could announce me. She hadn't changed, sharp haircut, sharper eyes, a woman who'd made herself out of grit and long nights in law libraries. She saw my cheek, and her expression cooled from warmth to steel. "Frank," she said, guiding me inside. "Sit. Tell me everything." I laid the folders on her desk, spreading out the papers like we used to spread blueprints at my firm. She leaned forward, scanning the loan agreement, nodding at each clause. When she reached Aaron's signature, her lips thinned into something like satisfaction. Principal, $300,000. 5-year term. Interest, 8% annually. Acceleration clause in the event of default. She tapped the page with a manicured nail. "He hasn't paid you a cent, has he?" "Not one," I said. She did the math in her head faster than I had with my calculator. "Total owed, $372,000. Today." I nodded. "He called it a gift." Her eyes flicked to mine. "Then he either forgot what he signed, or he thinks you won't enforce it." I told her about the moving truck, the suitcases, the slap. She listened without interruption, only jotting notes in her precise handwriting. When I described Danielle's hand across my face, she looked up sharply. "There were witnesses?" "Half the block," I said. "Harold Donnelly. Mrs. Alvarez. The Johnsons. Tom Ng's doorbell cam might have recorded it." Her pen scratched faster. "Perfect. That's not just assault, it's assault on a senior, on your own property, in front of multiple witnesses. Judges don't look kindly on that." I exhaled. The tightness in my chest eased a fraction. "Here's the plan," she said, sliding the papers into order. Step 1, demand letter. We send it certified mail. He has 10 days to pay the full amount, principal plus interest. Step 2, when he refuses, we file suit in Cook County Circuit Court for breach of contract. Step 3, civil action for assault and intentional infliction of emotional distress. With those witnesses, we can seek damages. Possibly punitive. Punitive? I repeated. She leaned back, eyes sharp. Punishment. Judges award them when behavior is outrageous. Your son tried to cheat you out of a loan, then his wife physically attacked you. Outrageous enough? I nodded slowly. Good. Now I need to know what you want. Is it repayment only, or are you also looking for damages? I thought of Lorraine's smile, of the promises Aaron had broken, of Danielle's hand across my face. My jaw tightened. Both. Nora's smile was small, professional, almost cold. Good. Because you'll get them. She pulled the legal pad closer and began drafting the bones of the letter right there, her handwriting steady and exact. To Aaron Tate, pursuant to the loan agreement dated June 14, 2021. Hearing my son's name framed in legal language was like hearing a diagnosis spoken aloud. Not shocking anymore, but final. "Frank," she said, pausing to meet my eyes, "I know this isn't easy. Suing your own son never is. But remember this, boundaries protect love. Without them, love is exploitation." I swallowed hard. I'm not sure there's love left. She didn't flinch. Then at least there will be justice. By the time I left her office, the demand letter was drafted and would be mailed before lunch. My footsteps on the old staircase felt heavier, but in a good way, like steel beams settling into place. Outside, the city hummed its ordinary Monday rhythm. People hurried past with paper cups and briefcases, worried about meetings and deadlines. None of them knew that in one office above Dearborn, a father had drawn a line through the sand and called it law. I walked back to my car with my shoulders squared, the bruise on my face still burning but no longer shameful. It was a marker, a reminder of where weakness had ended and resolve had begun. For years, I'd let Aaron's excuses soften me, let Lorraine's memory push me toward mercy. But mercy without limits is surrender. And I was done surrendering. As I turned the ignition, I pictured Aaron's reaction when he opened that letter. Surprise. Denial. Anger. Maybe fear. He thought I was too old, too soft, too lonely to fight. He was about to learn that even patient men have limits. And that paper, signed, witnessed, notarized, has a memory longer than blood. The envelope went out Tuesday morning, thick with the weight of every number, every clause, every promise broken. Nora had typed it herself on her firm's letterhead, language as sharp as a scalpel. You are hereby demanded to remit payment of $372,000 within 10 days, pursuant to the loan agreement dated June 14, 2021. Failure to comply will result in legal action in Cook County Circuit Court. I watched the receptionist hand it to the courier, who slipped it into his canvas bag with the indifference of a man carrying strangers' futures. As the glass door swung shut behind him, something shifted inside me. For months, maybe years, I'd been walking through life with my head bowed, weighed down by grief and disappointment. That morning, as the letter left my sight, I felt taller. The call came that evening. I'd been at the kitchen table, leafing through Lorraine's recipe cards, not to cook but to remember her handwriting. The phone rattled on the counter. Aaron's number lit the screen. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with disbelief. "What the hell is this?" I didn't answer right away. Silence has a way of prying truth out of people. "This letter," he pressed. $372,000? 10 days? Are you insane? I spoke calmly. That's the amount you owe me, Aaron. The contract specifies repayment with interest. You haven't made a single payment in nearly 3 years. Selling the condo triggered the acceleration clause. His laugh was brittle. Acceleration clause? Jesus, listen to yourself. This isn't some boardroom deal, this is family. You gave us that money. No, I said steady. I loaned it to you. Signed, notarized, witnessed. You and Danielle both agreed to the terms. That contract doesn't mean anything. His voice rose, sharp as broken glass. You can't sue your own son. No judge will side with you. Any competent judge will enforce a signed contract. I replied. And if you'd like, I can add assault charges for what Danielle did on my porch. The line went quiet for a beat, then filled with the sound of his breathing, shallow and fast. I imagined Danielle pacing in the background, whispering like poison. You're really going to drag your family through court? He said finally. Over money you don't even need? You've got your pension, your house. You sit alone in that big place, and instead of helping us, you're, what? Punishing us? I let the silence stretch again. He mistook it for weakness when I was younger, but age had taught me silence can be sharper than any word. You'll regret this, he snapped, voice cracking. We'll fight you every step of the way. I wrote his words down as soon as the line went dead. You'll regret this. We'll fight you. Evidence. Each sentence another brick in the wall he was building around himself. When I called Nora to report, she chuckled, the sound dry and professional. Perfect, she said. Threats on record strengthen your case. Juries hate bullies. The days that followed turned strange. Neighbors stopped me on the sidewalk. Quiet words of support passed like contraband. Mrs. Alvarez pressed a hand to mine and said, If you need me to testify, I will. I saw everything. Tomming slipped me a USB stick one evening. His doorbell cam had captured the tail end of the confrontation. Danielle's hand swinging, my stumble back against the doorframe, Aaron pulling her away. I saved the file on 3 different devices. Engineers don't trust single points of failure. By Friday, the bruise on my cheek had faded to yellow, but the neighborhood's memory stayed fresh. I found myself walking straighter, no longer avoiding eye contact. Humiliation had turned into something unexpected: community. People who once nodded politely now stopped to ask how I was holding up. Saturday morning, Harold knocked on my door, a mug of coffee steaming in his hand. "Frank," he said, "the whole block's behind you. We've all seen families fall apart, but what they did, unforgivable. Don't doubt yourself." "I'm not doubting," I told him. And I realized as I said it, I wasn't. That night, alone in my study, I laid the demand letter beside Lorraine's photo. Her smile in that frozen frame seemed different now, less wistful, more approving. I imagined her voice clear as it had been the day we signed our mortgage. "Being nice doesn't mean being weak, Frank. 10 days. That's what the letter gave him. 10 days to pay back what he owed, to prove he had even a shred of integrity left. I doubted he would, but the point wasn't whether he paid voluntarily. The point was that the choice was no longer his. For the first time since her death, I felt Lorraine's absence ease. Not gone, but softened. I had spent too long letting grief and guilt steer me into silence. The slap had burned away the last of it. I picked up the letter one last time, running my fingers across Nora's clean typeface. It was more than a legal document. It was a line drawn in ink, saying, "This far, no farther." When I set it back down, I knew with absolute certainty I was ready for court. The Saturday after the letter went out, I found myself dreading the morning walk to fetch the Tribune. For years, that ritual had been simple: robe, slippers, the cool bite of Chicago air, a nod to whichever neighbor was doing the same. But now, every set of eyes on the block felt like a reminder of my humiliation: the slap, the suitcases, the truck idling like a vulture in my driveway. I braced myself as I opened the front door, the bruise on my cheek almost gone but the memory raw. To my surprise, Mrs. Alvarez was already on my stoop, holding a casserole dish wrapped in foil. "Frank," she said, her voice firmer than her small frame suggested, "I brought you something. It's chicken and rice. Comfort food." I blinked. "You didn't need to." "I wanted to." She pushed the dish into my hands and lowered her voice. "I saw everything that morning. And I don't just mean the slap. I saw how they looked at you, like you were nothing. That's not right. I felt the heat rise in my face, not from shame this time, but from the sting of recognition." "Thank you," I said softly. She nodded once, businesslike. "If you need me to testify, I'll be there." That phrase, testify, rang louder than church bells. I carried the casserole inside and set it on the counter, staring at the foil as if it were made of gold. Support doesn't always come as words, sometimes it comes in Pyrex. By midday, there was another knock. This time, Tomming stood there with a USB stick in hand. "Frank," he said awkwardly. "My doorbell camera picked it up. Not all of it, but enough." He pressed the device into my palm. "You can see her hand swing. You can see you stumble. The audio's not crystal, but you hear shouting. I thought, well, you might need it." "Tom," I said, my throat tight. "This could make all the difference." He shrugged. "It's the truth. That's all." When he left, I plugged the stick into my laptop. The footage was grainy but damning: Danielle's arm rising, my head jerking back, the suitcases toppling in the background. I replayed it until the motion no longer felt like humiliation but like evidence: hard, undeniable, time-stamped truth. Later that afternoon, Harold came by, carrying his coffee mug like always. He sat on my porch steps, the autumn sun glinting off his silver hair. "You holding up?" he asked. "Better than I thought," I admitted. "Nora's confident. The contract is solid. And now with witnesses." More than witnesses, Harold interrupted. You've got a neighborhood. He gestured to the houses lined along the street, each with its own history, its own set of people who had quietly watched me mow my lawn, shovel my walk, wave on summer evenings. We've all seen family fights, Frank. But that morning? That crossed the line. None of us are going to let them pretend it didn't happen. For years I'd thought of myself as the quiet man on the block, the one who nodded, kept his yard tidy, didn't make waves. I never expected the block to rise up for me. Yet here they were, casserole in hand, USB stick in pocket, coffee mug on my steps. Sunday came, and with it the Johnsons on my porch. Both dressed in their jogging clothes, still flushed from their morning run. Frank, Mrs. Johnson said, we want you to know we'll back you up. We heard every word. Danielle's voice carried halfway down the street. Her husband added, we'll tell the court what we heard. Clear as day. I stood there speechless, gratitude catching in my throat. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like the lonely widower rattling around in an old house. I felt like part of a unit, a block, a community with edges that locked together. That evening, I sat in my study, Lorraine's photograph lit by the desk lamp. I laid the casserole lid, Tom's USB stick, and the Johnsons' handwritten statement on the desk beside the contract. It struck me then, this wasn't just my fight. It was our fight. The neighborhood had seen justice bent, and they wanted to help straighten it. I dialed Nora and told her everything, the casserole, the footage, the witnesses volunteering themselves. She didn't sound surprised. Juries love communities rallying together. It tells them this isn't about money, it's about respect, dignity, fairness. It makes your case even stronger. I'm not sure how to thank them all, I said. Win, she replied simply. That's thanks enough. When I hung up, I poured myself a scotch. Not out of grief this time, but out of resolve. The glass clinked against the desk as I lifted it toward Lorraine's photo. Looks like I'm not fighting alone anymore, I said. Her smile, frozen in that silver frame, seemed to agree. For years I had been the man who gave quietly, endured quietly, and suffered quietly. Now, with my neighbors at my back and the law on my side, I was something else entirely. Not a victim. Not a fool. A man preparing for battle, armed with more than paper. Armed with people. And that, I thought as I sipped the scotch, might be stronger than any contract. The letter had given Aaron 10 days. On the 7th, Nora called me into her office. We've had a response, she said, sliding a crisp white envelope across her desk. His attorney reached out. I unfolded the letter with the same care I'd use handling old blueprints, eyes scanning the neat paragraphs. The lawyer's name was David Heller, fresh out of law school by the look of his bar admission year. The tone was all bluster and bargaining. My client is prepared to acknowledge a family arrangement existed and to offer a reasonable repayment plan. I snorted. Reasonable. Nora leaned back, eyes narrowing. They're desperate. Let's hear what he thinks is reasonable. She pulled another sheet from her folder. $50,000 immediately. Then $2,000 per month until the debt is paid. I did the math in my head. $2,000 a month. At that rate, ignoring interest, it would take over 12 years to pay the principal. I'd be pushing 70. Absolutely not, I said. My voice surprised me. It didn't crack or waver. It was iron. Nora smiled faintly. That was my reaction too. But let's not dismiss it out of hand. A lowball first offer means they're worried. They know the contract is valid. They're trying to buy time. I pictured Aaron and Danielle sitting at their kitchen table, or maybe not even a kitchen table, given how quickly they'd burned through $700,000. I imagined them scowling over bank statements, Danielle angry about having to sell her designer couch or that Mercedes she flaunted on Instagram. Panic must have been setting in. Tell them no, I said firmly. All of it. Principal, interest, damages. Or we go to court. That's exactly what I plan to do, Nora replied. 2 days later, I got my first look at Aaron's lawyer in person. The conference room at Feldman and Price had been polished within an inch of its life, mahogany tables shining, blinds drawn against the glare. I sat at one end, Nora beside me, my folders stacked neatly like ammunition. David Heller sat across, younger than Aaron by a few years, his tie too tight, his hands restless. Beside him, an empty chair screamed absence. My son hadn't bothered to show. "Mr. Tate," Heller began, voice straining for calm. "My client wants to resolve this amicably. Dragging family through court benefits no one." I folded my hands. "Then he should have honored the agreement he signed." "Circumstances changed," Heller said quickly. The housing market," Nora cut in, "is irrelevant. Your client signed a contract. He defaulted. He sold the collateral property without repayment. That alone makes the entire balance due immediately." Heller's face flushed. "He can't pay $372,000 at once. It's impossible." I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Then he shouldn't have spent $700,000 in 6 weeks on cars, furniture, and vacations." The young lawyer blinked, clearly caught off guard that I knew the details. Nora's investigators had done their work well. "We're prepared to be reasonable." Heller tried again, his tone faltering. $50,000 now. A structured plan over time. Nora slid a paper across the table. Full repayment within 90 days. Principal plus interest. $372,000. In addition, $50,000 in civil damages for assault, emotional distress, and public humiliation. That's $422,000 total. We'll accept nothing less. The blood drained from Heller's face. He glanced at the paper, then back at me. "That's not negotiation, that's extortion." "It's justice," I said. For a moment, the room was silent but for the hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Heller gathered the papers, his hands shaking slightly. "My client needs time to consider." "You have 48 hours," Nora said. "After that, we file." He left quickly, his shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The door shut behind him with more force than necessary. I sat back in my chair, exhaling slowly. My heart was hammering, but my hands were steady. Nora looked at me, her eyes alight. "He's rattled." "That's good. His client's broke, and they both know it. They'll have to liquidate. Mercedes, jewelry, furniture. Everything Danielle paraded around on social media is about to become Exhibit A in their bankruptcy of judgment." Driving home, I passed families unloading groceries, kids riding bikes down tree-lined streets, people living ordinary lives without the weight of betrayal pressing on their chests. For once, I didn't envy them. My life had become something else, harder, sharper, but strangely more alive. At home, I poured a glass of Lorraine's favorite red and carried it to the porch. The neighborhood was quiet, leaves skittering along the sidewalk. I thought of her laughter, of how she told me once during a dispute with a contractor, "Being nice doesn't mean being weak, Frank. It means knowing when to stop being nice." I raised the glass toward her picture inside the window. "Looks like we've reached that point." For the first time in years, the wine didn't taste like loss. It tasted like resolve. 48 hours. Then the next move would be mine. The 48 hours ticked by like a slow drumbeat. Each time the phone rang, I expected Aaron's number, but it wasn't him. It was Harold checking in, Mrs. Alvarez asking if I'd like the casserole, Nora giving me crisp updates. The silence from my son's end of the line spoke louder than words. On the second evening, just as twilight painted the maple trees orange, my phone finally lit up with his name. "Dad," Aaron said, his voice ragged, stripped of the bravado he'd carried during our last call. We can't do this." $422,000? That's insane. We don't have it." I leaned back in my chair, pen already poised over a yellow pad. "Then you'll need to liquidate assets. Sell the Mercedes? Sell the furniture? Jewelry? Whatever it takes." There was a muffled argument in the background, Danielle's voice sharp, rising over his. He covered the receiver poorly, I heard her say. Don't let him bully us. He doesn't need the money. Aaron came back on, breath unsteady. This isn't right. You're destroying your own family over money. No, I said, calm as a judge reading a sentence. You destroyed this family the moment you decided my generosity made me a fool. This is about integrity, not money. You'll regret this, he hissed. We'll find ways to fight you. Ways you won't see coming. Every threat you make, I told him, becomes another line in my evidence file. Keep talking. Silence. Then the line went dead. I set the phone down gently, then began to write, transcribing every word. We'll find ways to fight you. Ways you won't see coming. Evidence, clean and precise. The next morning, Nora called. They're squeezed, she said. I've confirmed through a contact at their bank. They blew through most of the condo money already. The Mercedes? Paid in cash. Furniture, jewelry, vacations. No real savings left. Their only option is liquidation, loans against Aaron's salary, or settlement. And that, Frank, is exactly where we want them. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So this isn't just posturing. No. This is panic. That word stuck with me all day, panic. I imagined them in their apartment, Danielle furious at the thought of selling her designer sofa, Aaron pacing with overdue bills on the counter. Once upon a time, I would have softened at the picture, felt pity, wanted to shield him. But pity is dangerous when it's handed to people who see kindness as weakness. I wasn't going to make that mistake again. By Friday, I began seeing the cracks in real time. Danielle's once daily Instagram stories, photos of champagne glasses, luxury handbags, nights out downtown, had vanished. A single post appeared instead, a carefully cropped picture of a coffee mug, captioned "Simple pleasures matter most." It read like desperation wrapped in faux wisdom. Saturday morning, Harold knocked again, his mug steaming in the chill air. Frank, he said, the block's buzzing. Word is Aaron's been calling around for loans. Even stopped by Donnelly's place to ask for advice on refinancing. I shook my head slowly. He thinks he can stall. Harold studied me, then nodded. Don't let him. That afternoon, I pulled the original contract from the folder once more. Aaron's signature glared up at me. I traced the line with my finger, not out of nostalgia but as a reminder. He had made a choice. I had simply decided to hold him to it. That night, my phone rang again. This time Danielle's voice hit me full in the ear, sharp and venomous. You selfish old man, she spat. You're ruining our lives over a piece of paper. Do you feel proud? Does it make you happy to see your son suffer? I let her rant, her words tumbling out like stones. We'll never forgive you. You'll die alone. You're pathetic. I didn't interrupt. Every word was ammunition. When she finally ran out of breath, I said evenly, Mrs. Tate, this call is being recorded. Do you wish to continue making threats? The line went silent, then clicked dead. I called Nora immediately. She called. Threatened. Said I'd die alone? Perfect, Nora replied, her tone crisp. Keep the recording safe. We'll add intimidation and harassment to the civil action. That was the moment the fear in me evaporated. I realized they weren't in control anymore. Their rage, their desperation, their insults, they were the flailing of people drowning in consequences they thought would never reach them. I sat in my study, Lorraine's photograph glowing under the desk lamp. They thought I'd cave, I said softly. They thought kindness meant weakness. Her smile, forever frozen, seemed almost to agree. The squeeze was working. The walls were closing in on them, not me. And for the first time in years, I felt like the man Lorraine had believed me to be, steady, unshakable, unwilling to bow. The next step would come soon. 90 days to pay in full. But if Aaron and Danielle thought they could bluff their way out, they were about to learn that even patience has an edge sharper than steel. 90 days. That was the line Nora had carved into the agreement like a groove in steel. 90 days for Aaron to repay every cent, or the courts would take everything from him. The first 30 passed with silence, except for the occasional late-night call that ended in threats or Danielle's shrill attempts at guilt. I stopped answering. I let voicemail collect them, and I let Nora archive them. Each message became another nail in the coffin they built for themselves. On the 42nd day, I got a call that wasn't threats but panic. Aaron's voice shook as he said, "Dad, we sold the Mercedes. Danielle pawned her jewelry. We're trying, but it won't be enough. Can't you just take what we have and call it square?" "No," I said. "The agreement is clear. Full repayment with interest, plus damages. You're asking for the impossible." "No," I replied. "I'm asking for the exact thing you promised when you signed." He hung up on me, but I didn't feel the usual sting. I felt clarity. By day 70, Nora received official notice from their lawyer. They were ready to negotiate in earnest. Which meant one thing: panic had shifted into surrender. We met in Nora's conference room again. The mahogany table gleamed, papers stacked neatly, pens aligned like soldiers. Across from us sat David Heller, looking worse for wear. His tie was loose, his eyes ringed with exhaustion. This time, Aaron sat beside him, shoulders slumped, a shadow of the son I remembered. Danielle wasn't there. "My client," Heller began weakly, "is prepared to settle." Nora's voice was ice. "Full repayment plus damages, or we proceed." Aaron looked at me for the first time in weeks. His eyes were bloodshot, his face thinner. "Dad, please. We can get you the money, but we need more time. 30 days. That's all I'm asking." I studied him. The boy who once brought me drawings from grade school. The teenager who asked me for help fixing his first car. The young man who sat at my kitchen table begging for $300,000 with promises he never intended to keep. "You'll have 30 days, I said finally. "But only because it's in the agreement Nora drafted. Not because you asked?" Relief flickered across his face, but it wasn't gratitude, it was survival. The papers were slid across the table. Aaron's hand shook as he signed. His signature sat below mine, binding him to terms he could no longer laugh off as family talk. When he pushed the pen away, he muttered, "You're really proud of yourself, aren't you?" I leaned forward, meeting his eyes. "No. I'm not proud. I'm tired. Tired of being treated like a fool. This isn't about pride, Aaron. It's about finally teaching you that promises matter." He didn't answer. He just gathered his coat and left the room, Heller scrambling to keep up. 30 days later, the transfer hit my account, $422,000. Principal. Interest. Damages. The sum glowed on the bank screen, less like wealth and more like vindication. I printed the statement and slid it into the folder alongside the original contract. The first page bore Aaron's eager scrawl from 3 years ago. The last page bore his reluctant signature from 30 days ago. Beginning and end. A circle closed. That evening, Harold stopped by with a bottle of wine. "Word on the block is your son paid up," he said with a grin. He did. Harold poured us each a glass, and we sat on my porch as the street settled into twilight. The same street where Danielle had slapped me in front of the neighbors. Where my humiliation had burned hottest. "You showed real courage," Harold said. "Most people would have folded. You didn't." I swirled the wine in my glass, looking at the way the light caught the deep red. I just finally stopped being weak. "Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness," Harold said. "It's enabling." I nodded slowly. Lorraine always said that. Took me this long to believe it. Later, when the house was quiet again, I sat in my study. Lorraine's photograph glowed in the lamplight, her smile frozen but somehow approving. I whispered to her frame, "It's done." He learned. The house felt different now. Not empty, not lonely, settled. A fortress, not a cage. Aaron and Danielle would rebuild, maybe wiser, maybe not. That was their road to walk. Mine was here, in the home I'd defended, with neighbors who had stood beside me, with dignity reclaimed. At 68, I finally understood something I should have known decades ago. Patience is not the same as weakness. And sometimes, the strongest thing a man can do is say, enough. The contract was signed. The money was repaid. The lesson was carved into the fabric of our lives. And for the first time in years, I felt peace. The wire cleared on a Tuesday morning, quiet as snowfall. One moment, my balance was the same tired number I'd seen for years. The next, $422,000 sat in my account. Principal. Interest. Damages. Justice quantified in black and white. I stared at the screen longer than I needed to. It wasn't joy I felt. Not triumph either. Relief, maybe. The kind that comes after months of holding your breath and finally letting it out. I printed the statement, slid it into the manila folder labeled Aaron, Loan Agreement 2021. The folder bulged now, withdrawal slips from my retirement, the thank you card he'd written back then, copies of the demand letter, witness statements, Nora's meticulous notes, and now the repayment. Beginning to end, the whole story captured on paper. Paper had been my salvation. Paper doesn't forget. That evening, Harold appeared on my porch, a bottle of red tucked under his arm. "Heard through the grapevine you got paid," he said, settling into the chair beside me. "I did," I replied. "Good for you, Frank. Not many men have the guts to stand up to family like that." He poured us each a glass. The wine was rich, full-bodied. Lorraine would have loved it. We sat watching the block wind down, kids chasing the last of the daylight, dogs tugging at leashes, curtains drawn against the coming chill. This was the same street where Danielle had struck me, where neighbors had gasped, where humiliation had burned through me like fire. And yet here I was, still standing, not broken but tempered. "Tell me something," I asked Harold. "Was I too hard on him?" He didn't answer right away. He swirled his glass, considered the question the way only a retired teacher could, weighing it carefully. Finally, he said, "Kindness without boundaries isn't kindness, Frank. It's enabling. Better he learned it from you than from the world. The world doesn't forgive the way fathers do." I nodded slowly, letting his words settle. Lorraine had always said the same. She believed in love, yes, but love tied to accountability. I'd forgotten that balance somewhere along the way. After Harold left, I carried my glass inside and sat in my study. Lorraine's photograph glowed under the lamplight, her smile as steady as the day I'd taken it. "Lorraine," I whispered, "you'd be proud." The house no longer felt empty. It felt earned. It felt defended. For months, I had feared growing old alone, rattling around in too many rooms. But solitude and loneliness aren't the same. Tonight, the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Aaron hadn't called since signing the settlement. Maybe he never would. Maybe Danielle would forbid it. Maybe they'd rebuild their lives, brick by brick, with less arrogance and more humility. That was their road to walk. Mine was simpler. Wake up. Brew coffee. Read the Tribune. Wave to the neighbors who'd stood with me when it mattered. And live without the weight of betrayal pressing on my chest. I thought back to the man I'd been before all this began, the one who answered Aaron's phone call about selling the condo, fork clattering against the plate. That man had been shocked, wounded, ready to fold. He doesn't exist anymore. Now there's only me, a widower, yes, but also a man who rediscovered his spine, who learned that patience has limits and kindness has edges. I closed the manila folder and placed it in the desk drawer, locking it with the small brass key. It wasn't just a folder anymore, it was a monument. A record that justice, though delayed, can still be delivered. The night air slipped in through the open window, carrying the sound of the L rattling past. For the first time in years, I felt not restless but calm. The city moved around me, busy and loud, but here, in my home, there was stillness. Tomorrow the phone might ring again. Maybe Aaron, trying for reconciliation. Maybe Harold with neighborhood news. Maybe Nora with updates from another case. Whoever it was, I'd answered differently now. Not with hesitation, not with fear of being used, but with the steady voice of a man who had learned to fight for his dignity. At 68, I had finally understood, some battles are worth fighting, no matter how late in life they come. The storm had passed. And for the first time in years, peace stayed. That was my story. Now I'd like to hear yours. Share it in the comments below.